All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's meeting of Cabinet, Monday the 3rd of November, 6:30 at the Council Chamber Town Hall. Welcome to those who are joining us, members online, and any residents who are monitoring us through the website. Okay, right. Please authorise me to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of October as a correct record of proceedings. Thank you very much indeed. Lisa, are there apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Are there any additional agenda items?
There are none.
None. Are there any urgent decisions?
There are none.
Excellent. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interests, non-registrable interest in matters of the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Councillor Sue Projak.
Thank you, Chair. Sussex Wildlife Trust, I'm a member.
Thank you.
Item 6, the same, Sussex Wildlife Trust.
Thank you. And Councillor Timpey, Hazel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item 6, trustee at Delaware Pavilion and member of Bexhill Town Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No other declarations online. Yes, good evening, Carl. Councillor Carl Maynard.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Agenda item 6 is executive member of East Sussex County Council, as I suspect that East Sussex County Council may come up in discussion. So just that one. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And Councillor John Barnes. John?
Yes, I think I'd bet, since Sue thinks it's right to declare, I'm a member of the Sussex Wildlife Trust and also a member of the Friends of Rye Harbour. I'm not in a position of governing authority on either.
Thank you very much, John. That's noted. We can move into agenda item 6, being the draft budget challenge proposals. This report summarised the work that's been taken to date with regard to proposals for savings and went through scrutiny, I believe, on the 13th of October, and it was rigorously looked at, and there were some comments and recommendations which I think have been carried forward. So I'll invite Charlotte Spendley, our 151 officer, to present this report. Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so the report summarises our work that we've done so far on the budget process. As you'll be aware, we commenced that process earlier this year to aid discussion, planning and consultation. As the report outlines, the funding landscape remains really challenging with a number of unknowns. We had an update at Cabinet at the last meeting, which identified that our reserves may be reduced by 2.3 million this financial year, also highlighting the kind of pressures that we face. So it is imperative for us to look everywhere within our budget, and heads of service have been very much part of that process, and they all attended scrutiny with me to discuss the proposals that are in front of you. You'll also recall that you previously considered a policy around flexible capital receipts, and that will aid our flexibility moving forward in how we can use capital receipts to aid efficiency programmes and transformation, and we'll see a bit more of that in the next round of budget papers that come forward. I've highlighted in the report the need to kind of remain focused on our statutory duties in terms of stewardship of public funds and reserves, even in the light of LGR and what's ahead. And there's a brief summary in the paper around the wider funding picture and the unknowns that we have at the moment. The fair funding consultation closed in the summer and we await the outcome. And of course, the real data and detail won't be known to us until the local government finance settlement, which will be published just before Christmas. That positively will be a 3-year settlement for the first time in a long time in local government. So it will at least provide us some certainty going forward. So for the short term, we've focused very much internally on what decisions are available to us as an authority and what proposals we might seek to put forward to the public and interested parties for this budget. As you know, we, in the current financial year, have a budget shortfall of 694,000. So heads of service were targeted in the first instance of trying to find 10% savings for their service area of their gross budget. We RAG rated those both in terms of deliverability and the impact on services and reputation of taking those savings forward, and they have all been considered rigorously by the panel and lead members. Those proposals are outlined in Appendix A, B and C, the savings, growth and fees and charges. As the Chair mentioned, ONS had a really good debate at their meeting on the items. They did highlight within Appendix A saving proposal 12, which they asked the Chief Exec to consider, and some further work has been done on that, but the proposal still remains in front of you for consideration at Cabinet to move forward to consultation. Just to highlight one further thing before I'm happy to take questions if there are. In paragraph 26 and 27 of the covering report, I have identified some late growth items which have come about because, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we started this process very early, and of course things do emerge and become clearer. So there are 5 items there which have emerged since we took the original items to the panel for consideration. They amount to growth of 248,000. Part of that will be offset by some kiosk income, which is considered later on in the confidential item in this agenda, so I haven't incorporated it here in this budget paper, but those items are also for your consideration, and I highlight them because you haven't considered them in the previous iterations of the budget challenge process. So I'll pause there and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I think there's a couple of things that sort of straight away. When we introduced the budget challenge last year, and we're looking to shave off 10%, we've gone back and we shaved off another 10%. So, you know, that has meant an awful lot of additional work and the ability to be able to make these savings. So I think that officers should be congratulated on that. I think this exercise started early this year, and as a result of that, the late entries that we refer to were inevitable. But, you know, bearing in mind that we need to get this out for consultation sooner rather than later, I think it was important that we did start it, so we'll have to bear with that, that situation. Are there any questions from within the chamber, from members? Councillor Sue Project, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Am I allowed to congratulate you yet? I know it's not formal, but congratulations on your new role. We'll get you a new label. And thank you for your presentation. I mean, a few things that, in terms of the consultation, does somebody read it for plain English? And we were talking earlier about visuals and how good they are in explaining what the percentages are and where the money comes from. And the other thing is that I'm always amazed at the services we provide for such a little money in terms of Band D, if you use Band D as a marker. And, you know, we've made a list somewhere of all the services. And good for residents to actually see that list, especially as local government review is coming along. So it's interesting. I mean, I have lots of questions about fair funding. It's not going to be fair, but we can't deal with that until we know before Christmas. Do we have a special meeting, or what do we do when we've got the announcement about? Because as I understand it, some councils are going to get nothing. But is there any sort of rumours round the block to say, should we start thinking about that, or should we just wait?
Thank you. Yes, really interesting about the consultation, because we discussed the consultation management team today, and yes, there will be a plain English check undertaken on it. We can certainly look to build on the visuals that we have previously used, and certainly use those, but consider what else we could put in that could be visual. And in terms of services that we provide, yes, again, the management team discussed that very point and around highlighting those services. So absolutely, we can incorporate all of those ideas. In terms of after the announcement, so settlement is not expected until right up towards Christmas, probably the week before Christmas from what we hear. So I don't know whether or not you'd want to have a special meeting in the week running up to Christmas. I'm happy to do one, but so probably early January, potentially a member briefing might be appropriate. In terms of early news, nothing really very firm at the moment, but I'll seek to keep members up to date as it emerges.
Thank you very much.
Yes, perhaps if there are some key points that come out of it, Charlotte, that can be presented before we have a briefing into the new year, so there's something in front of us and it's not coming completely cold. And I like the idea that Councillor Bayliss did with regards to the pie chart, Christine. Would you want to make a further comment on that? Because I think the visuals are so important.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, the Independents did a pie chart for when they were going for re-election. So, and it's very similar. Well, it's the same really, because it's the same breakdown.
I think it creates that situation that when residents see what goes out each month from their bank account, that we get it all and spend it all. But that's not the case when you start breaking it down. As Councillor Project said, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know how many services are there, Lisa. Have you got at one time there was like 60 or 70? Yeah, if you put everything there that's there, which just shows, you know, people do get value, and there is this ability to be able to come in and, you know, we're like a broker, aren't we? You come in with your problem and we try and resolve it for you. Right, Hazel, sorry, I didn't see that. Your hand's down now. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, I support Sue completely on the plain English point, and obviously about using that pie chart. That pie chart really clearly demonstrates that only a third of the cost of our services is met through the council tax. You know, that's really important for people to know that, because people have this idea that the council tax pays for the whole of the services that Rother provides, and maybe income from car parks or other income from rents sort of puts a cherry on the top of the cake. That's not the case. You know, those bits of income, are crucial in covering the sorts of costs, of the services we provide. And this idea that there's double taxation, it just really refutes that, that position. Chair, you talked about congratulating officers, but I would say well done. But this is I didn't want to become a councillor to cut back on services. I've actually got some sympathy with officers who now have to say to members on occasions, and we've had a case this week, haven't we, Councillor McCall, where because of the cuts that we've made in previous years, we're not able to deliver a discretionary service, to residents, and it's really, really disappointing. So I would probably use a different terminology, because I just think it's a really sorry state that us and the rest of the country finds itself, after 14 years really of austerity and cutting back, and that is the situation. But I do think everybody's done a good job in looking at this, and the challenge has been effective as well in terms of challenging and making sure that you know, that we can afford and can go forward and cover the sorts of services that we find ourselves, you know, those statutory services, making sure that we at least provide those properly. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think right. I think that so often when you are in a cost review, efficiencies are driven out as well. People realise that there are limited resources or fewer resources. So therefore, you know, efficiencies need to come into it and being part of it. Online, Councillor John Barnes. John?
Yes, a number of observations. I think we may well need a special briefing after the budget if they do start, if the government do start playing around with council tax, because I'm by no means clear what the future funding of local government would look like if they begin to make changes there. So with that proviso, I would like to join in congratulating Charlotte on her new appointment. Very welcome, although coming into extraordinarily difficult times. I've lived through periods of austerity before, and they are never easy. And obviously, with the new technology, we may be able to drive up our productivity and efficiency to some extent, but we have a very limited future as an authority, and that probably puts a primacy on cuts, which none of us really welcome, but is cruel necessity, I'm afraid. That said, there are some cuts which have a token significance both ways. Sometimes to do something like freezing councillor allowances is the right sort of token to give the public to show that we're sharing in their hardship. We don't take these decisions at all lightly. But there are others which send signals out which I think are troubling, and one of those came up at scrutiny, and I did want to just address it briefly tonight. The Rye Harbour Nature Reserve has three important things as far as Rother is concerned. One that is often overlooked is it's a key part of our sea defences. Secondly, it's an internationally important nature site, particularly for birds and nesting birds. Indeed, some nesting birds, it's one of the few sites in the country where they do in fact nest. It's also, however, an enormous tourist attraction. And since we put up the Discovery Centre, of which I'm very proud as one of the Friends, we put more than $1.5 million into it as Friends. That gets an enormous number of visitors, and so does the reserve in general. We're talking about getting on for 500,000 people. So it's been a proud thing for Rother to be part of the partnership that actually manages that reserve. And we have not only had a place on the management committee, but a former district councillor, Tony Lloyd, who was one of our representatives, has chaired that committee for more years than I care to remember. Our part of that is the foreshore, which we happen to own and we put in to be managed as part of the reserve. East Sussex were the dominant partner for many years, but when they had to make economies, they handed over the managing partner role to Sussex Wildlife Trust. But we still retain a place on the management committee, so do East Sussex, and we still make contributions. And it seems to me, for what is a relatively trivial sum of 1,000, just over, which is what we contribute at the moment. We get a disproportionate place in the councils of this very important body and this reserve, which is so important to Rother. And it does seem to me that it's cutting off our nose to spite our face if we actually make that cut. And I shall undoubtedly look in the consultation, if it stays, to see what the reaction will be from the Friends and from other bodies who are interested in the future of the reserve. I think it's sending the wrong signal at the wrong time. If it were a much larger sum, it would be a different matter. I think cutting back on that sum might then have been appropriate. But to cut it out altogether seems to me inappropriate, and I hope very much the Cabinet will listen to the plea from overview and scrutiny.
Excuse me. Thank you, John. Councillor Timpey, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Barnes, because I was going to propose that we do actually accept overview and scrutiny's proposal, because, as been mentioned, it's a very, very important part of our tourism and also the wildlife. So I would like to propose that and look for a seconder, please.
Councillor Christine Bailey? Yeah, okay. Anybody else we can make a comment on that or come back, please?
I redeclare an interest as well as a member of thank you, Councillor Barnes. It does seem gesture politics going on here, because we did enormously support this project certainly when the Discovery Centre was built. I think we put something like 20,000 into that pot. And it was in the days of the EU, and the EU gave them over 70,000 into that pot. And and Councillor Barnes is absolutely right. It's enormously popular. It's every time I go down there, it's good for flat walking. Every time I go down there, I'm amazed at how many people there are there. So it's enormously good for tourism. But I think that when I think of the work that our officers have had to go through and the savings they had to make, when it was austerity the first time, we did something called zero-based budgeting. Basically looked at everything from the beginning and do we want it, do we need it, can we do without it, can we? And we've gone through the same thing with our officers and finding these sometimes paltry sums, and perhaps 1,000 is a paltry sum to this council, I don't know. I hardly think so when we've been cutting corners, saving postage stamps and all sorts of things. So I just think that Sussex Wildlife Trust, the Rye Visitor Centre, they would understand. And actually, we are not going to exist now, are we? So we won't have a place on the board, and neither will county, because both organisations will have gone. So if you feel strongly that it's a good gesture, but it's rather an empty one, in my view, they've got about 2,000 members. So I just think it would not be supported.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Sue. If I can invite Chief Executive Lorna.
Thanks, Chair. Just to let you know, the Head of Planning did have a meeting with Tony Lloyd from the Management Committee, the Chair of the Management Committee, and had a good discussion about our contribution, and there was an understanding about the position that Rother is in. I think it's Chris Hoggart, who's the RDC rep, who's a town councillor in Rye, I believe. And Councillor Prochak's right, we make a contribution of £1,000, East Sussex contribute £5,000, but of course that will need to all be looked at when the new authority is in place. They did make the point that there's 500,000 visitors a year to the nature reserve, and that also noted the educational activities, definitely really brilliant work that's happening there. But, you know, it is probably worth looking at their financial position. They do have a total of reserves of £3 million in 23-24. That's sort of getting on for where Rother is, if you put it in context. And Wilden, I know it's outside of our patch, but it's certainly supporting their operation. have formed a partnership, and that's £1.2 million partnership with Sussex Wildlife Trust for a 5-year nature restoration project. So there's big money coming into them in the future, and I just wanted to set the context of the decision that you need to make. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that information. No other comments from within. Externally, Councillor Paul Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll firstly start by congratulating Charlotte on her new position and thanking Andrew for the work he's put in over the last few years. Yeah, as said, there's a few sort of points of issue here that we picked up at scrutiny. One was, as John said, was the sort of perceived penny pinching, if you like, on the nature reserve. It is in my patch, so it's sort of, I could say it's dear to me. I was down there 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was. Walked down there, had a coffee in the Discovery Centre, walked out to the end of the sea, looked at the sea, turned around and come back again. How many of the 500,000 people who visit there actually go in the Discovery Centre and have a coffee, I do not know all the percentages, but you know, you can park for free. There's a donation box that the parish council have, which probably raises a few quid for them to maintain the toilets and the car park. So yeah, that would be perceived as a bit of penny pinching, and if that could be sort of looked at again, it could be beneficial, it could not. Equally, on the Canberra parking, we sort of asked the question on, you know, is the summer season starting on the 1st of April too early? It might be nice at Easter, but it's May and June aren't always that good, May especially. So could we sort of shorten the summer season of the higher tariffs, but obviously that doesn't stack up. So we asked the question. The other one that was a strange one was the proposal to charge £25 for sponsored walks on Rother Land, which seems sort of extreme, but then Charlotte explained to us that the cost was actually £84, but it didn't include sponsored walk. So they had to pay, if you wanted to do a sponsored walk and do it properly, it cost you 84 quid. So 25 quid charge was actually a bonus. So it swings and roundabouts, and you could be argued not all bad news. But no, we haven't. We looked at things, but we haven't come up with a magical large figure of 6 figures that would help us in any massive way, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think the level of cuts or savings were around 600 odd thousand. You know, and if there's just one that's come forward at £1,000, you know, quite honestly, for the purpose of reputation and whatever, despite the fact that we know what Lorna has told us, you know, that this is not an organisation that are bereft of any funds at all. But from a gesture point of view, I would support the fact that if its members desire to withdraw that, and I would be very comfortable to support that as well. What do we do now? Do we get to a situation where we vote on this report, enable the proposals to go forward as part of the consultation, and then that will come out then, presumably?
I'll look to Butter, but they are Cabinet's proposals going out to consultation. So if you wish to remove that item, we can remove it from the items going out to consultation, or we can leave it in and see what the consultation feedback is. You'll receive the consultation feedback in the new year once that's concluded. Either is fine from my perspective.
Okay. So we've had a proposal that we actually withdraw or amend the proposal that's going out, and that's seconded. And is that what members feel that they want to support, or shall we wait and get the consultation, because there may be other things coming in that we would start to look at? We might as well get it all together at one time. I'll leave it up to you guys. Yeah? So do we...
We can table and look at it again when we've had the consultation.
If the thoughts are that yes, it's something that we would, as a gesture, look to consider, let's wait until the consultation is there and everyone is made there, because there will be other things for us to look at. Is that fair enough? Sorry, Christine.
Yes, thank you. I mean, maybe it might be something that we could highlight in the consultation, so that we get we ask a specific question about, about those that particular grant. I'd be happy to unsecond the motion if we could do that.
I think if any organisations are sitting on £3 million, which is equivalent to what we've got in our reserves to run a district council, I'm not sure £1,000 isn't going to break the bank. So are we happy to sort of go forward on that line? Those in favour of that proposal? And that's unanimous, and thank you very much indeed. Right, next item is the Housing Renewal Financial Assistance Policy, item 7. The Right Honourable Rory. Are you ready, Rory, to introduce this?
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. Thanks to Richard for the report. It's obviously the renewal of the Disabled Facilities Grant, as it's also known. And I think the point's well made that 30,000 doesn't seem like a lot, really. And so therefore the proposal to increase that by 10,000, I think is a good one. It hasn't gone up for many years. I remember 11, 12 years ago when I was in a position in Hertfordshire that the grant was 30,000 then. It hasn't gone up during all this time. Wasn't expected to go up through the years of austerity. So it's a small amount, but I think it's important to note that quite a lot is achieved even within that small amount of money. Looking at the figures, there were 201 applications in 2024-25, 189 were approved and 124 were completed, which is a good record. And I don't think we should underestimate the fact that a lot of these improvements are about improving the dignity of people's lives. Grab rails, ramps, adaptations to bathrooms and kitchens. So it's absolutely vital that we continue this. And if we can, we're talking about cuts earlier, but this is actually something that really has probably too much to say transformative effect, but it certainly has a really good effect on people's lives and helping them to maintain dignity in their homes. So I obviously support this and would hope that my colleagues would as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rory. Are there any other members want to have a comment?
I certainly will, because certainly my residents, when I say my Robertsbridge, Salehurst, have benefited in the past from these grants and certainly support it going up. And we had one resident in a wheelchair who couldn't get out of his house. And there was a problem because our survey said the ramp couldn't be done. And I think it was a cost issue. What happened was we then got in the Darvel Bruderhof, and they came in and made the ramp for him. And it was life-changing. He could actually get out of his house. They've done other ramps which are not so challenging, so maybe it should be done. And it is life-changing for people to have things like that, to be able to get out of your house. Thank you.
I think there are excellent examples how this fund makes things different for people, improves people, and I think it's absolutely vital because that's really what part of our responsibility is, isn't it, to make life better for people. Richard, did you want to make any sort of comment as to on this, please?
I was just going to add that obviously at the moment we receive the funding through the Better Care Fund, which goes to the East Sussex County Council, and then they distribute it to us. The funding can be used for other purposes, but really the DFGs have to take the bulk of the money. We have some money left available, but majority of that funding does go to DFGs. We are also at the position where the cost of these works exceeds the current caps we have, so it is important to go up to £40,000, as Councillor McWhorter has said. We obviously try and get other funding. If it's a Southern Housing properties, then we sometimes get some funding from Southern Housing. If there's a child involved, then we also get some additional funding from East Sussex County Council. So even with that, if we even increase the discretionary element up to £40,000, it still doesn't sometimes meet the full cost of the works which need to be carried out. And therefore, we do sometimes then have to get funding from other organisations. But the officers involved with the DFG funding are very expert at dealing with that. And I think the other issue I want to really mention was that as a service, when we compare ourselves against the national statistics, we do actually get the grants approved very quickly and get the works completed as soon as we can. And we're fortunate in that we work with Town and Country, who do the draw up the specifications and do the tendering for the builders. So that works very well. They also work in Hastings, and hopefully that will continue. The government were consulting on changing the way that we receive the DFG funding, so the money would then come directly to us rather than going through East Sussex. And we've had to look at the government funding formula, and we believe it will mean that we should at least get as much money as we get now, and hopefully a little more. So we're quite happy with the government's proposals in that regard.
Thank you, Richard. There's a couple of members online. Councillor John Barnes, and then Councillor Carl Maynard.
Yes, I wanted to say that not only is there enormous social benefit from this, but it can, of course, actually enable savings to the public purse elsewhere. I know of one recent case where the installation of one of these facilities, in that case a stair lift, kept somebody out of a care home, and therefore this was extraordinarily cost effective. In another, we actually did wonders for somebody who was badly disabled in a car crash, and he was able to keep his house, and has since worked solidly for a charity getting other disabled people back into work. In other words, what we're doing here is not merely a huge social benefit to the community, but it can also actually generate savings to the public purse elsewhere. It's one of the best things we do, and I think actually we're doing the right thing in actually reviewing the policy, and if we can raise the sum, then we should do so. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for those comments, John, I think which we all would support. Carl.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. It's only to declare an interest as an executive member of East Sussex County Council, as Richard has mentioned, East Sussex County Council in the current funding arrangements. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All I would ask is, are there sort of examples that can be circulated, say, every quarter or every 6 months to members, so that they're aware? I think it's an excellent sort of facility to be able to have, but let's actually raise that a bit so that people know, and it just might click into something which they may not aware of. So what do we need to do with this? We need to just remind me. It's a recommendation to council. Are you going to propose that, Rory? And someone will second that, and in favour of that, and that's unanimous. And thank you, Richard, for bringing this report together this evening. Bear with me, please. Members' allowances, data protection, freedom of information. Freedom of information, item 8, which is page 53. Right. Have we got, yes, we have Mark to bring this report forward. Mark, I listened to scrutiny, and I think this came forward to scrutiny as well, I believe, did it not? So I think most members are aware of the reason to be doing this, in so much as making sure that our policies are dusted down as we move down this pathway to whatever is going to be at the end of it all. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Cabinet. As the Chair said, this report introduces, it's one of 2 reports that improves our data governance. Firms our position in relation to what we're doing, and also puts us in a good position as we transition through local government reorganisation. So this report details a new policy in relation to the Freedom of Information Act requests and the environmental information requests, and it just details our handling. How we go about doing this. The main policy is detailed in Appendix A, and like I say, this outlines a clear improvement in relation to how we go about this function as an authority, and it builds on the guidance that we've been working on and it now introduces best practice from the Information Commissioner. Kelvin, who is the author of this report, who's our data protection officer, is doing an overhaul of a lot of our data governance work at Rother, and like I say, cementing what we do as policy, and really putting us in a really good place to move forward. So this report, looks for approval for this policy, along with granting delegated authority to the data protection officer, which is Kelvin, along with our CIRO, which is the senior information risk officer, which is Bhuta Singh, just to make minor amendments to the policy in line with legislation. And that's a very brief summary of the report, but happy to answer questions. We have Kelvin online if there is some detailed specifics, but thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for making that quite clear and the purpose behind all of this.
Thank you, Chair. Just to thank you, Mark, and his team for doing the work behind this report. And just to say that the Freedom of Information Act was passed 25 years ago, and 5 years later it created a legal right for citizens to request information from public authorities. And this was a shift in the government approach to information and a significant step towards a more open culture of government. And it's been designed for more transparency and to tackle perceived secrecy in government. And it's been a vital tool in journalism, researchers and private citizens alike. And there has been some criticism of the FOI requests. And this report and the measures therein go to address these concerns whilst maintaining transparency. I'm very happy to support. Thanks for the opposite work again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aaron. Any other questions from within the chamber? No. Externally, Councillor Paul Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This one, well, not necessarily this specific, but quite often at scrutiny, the freedom of information requests come up as a sort of an amber, if you like, where the sort of time to respond to them takes longer than our sort of target, which doesn't really bother me, to be honest. But when we sort of asked the question of Anna, it sort of sometimes comes back that we get a lot of requests for information from sort of university students, and that to me seems annoying, if you like. It seems like an easy way for someone doing a degree to just send out emails to various district councils, county councils, whatever, government organisations, if you like, to let them do the work that ultimately you would expect that they would be doing the research. But if that's the way it is, then that's the way it is. I don't know. I'm just a carpenter. But is that is there anything in this new document that sort of covers some of that off, or sometimes we get sort of I understand there's you might get a number of freedom of information from one person or organisation, which again is officer time, and if someone's got a specific question, then that's great, and we can deal with it. We have the officers to deal with it. But if you've got someone just sort of egging for information on a degree, then it seems like they're taking the mickey a bit. Just a point. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for making your point. Mark, is there any sort of response to that, or is that something which is more prevalent than we think it is?
I will address some of that, and then I'll invite Kelvin in to respond as well, if I may, as our a technical expert in this field. The policy in the appendix of the policy does detail a list of exemptions for requests. So it is clear to the requester, the person making requests, potentially areas that we may actually say we can't actually provide this information based on this exemption. That is my understanding, but it is a very technical field, and hence why we've drafted in the assistance from Kelvin. But Kelvin, can I introduce you to respond to Cabinet's question in relation to this.
Yes, good evening, Kelvin. It's nice to see you. Presumably there is a filter process in some way. Is that what you're saying, Mark? That there are perhaps those that we would prioritise and others could be time wasters?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, freedom of information, it is a tool that can be abused by the general public, but unfortunately the law states that we need to respond. As Mark correctly stated, we have a number of exemptions for which we can employ to restrict users. There's also things like when there's more than one request, we can combine them together, and then we can employ exemptions like time limits. There is a time limit and a cost that we can also apply. But I do appreciate and understand we do get requests from students, but we are using the extensions, the exemptions, and trying to stay within the constraints as well as the compliance that we need to do to ensure that we are complying with the Act.
Okay, thank you for that. And I suppose it's something that we need to be monitoring for the right reasons. Are there any other questions of Mark or Kelvin in any way? Butta, have you got anything to add to this particular report?
Thank you, Chair. Now, I was going to say exactly the same thing, that the policy outlines the exceptions and exemptions depending on whether it's a Freedom of Information Act or Environmental Information Regulation request, and that then defines how we would deal with it. So on balance, we would need to take a view as to whether we can provide that information or whether there's an appropriate exemption to be or exception to be applied. And it could be, for example, that a repeat requester or something that's already in the public domain is not something that we have to assist with because they can provide it themselves or look for it themselves.
So this report gives us the flexibility.
Absolutely.
Ash, sorry to ignore you. Yes, Ash?
That's all right, no problem. Good evening, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know I love a governance policy. I was just going to say, one of the previous meetings, we discussed the vexatious policy that we put in place. Should we not be trying to link these two together, or at least make reference to that within this policy in terms of a flow? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Butta looks very excited to reply to that.
Thank you, Chair. All I would say is that they're slightly separate because the vexatious policy is the council's own determination on how they would deal with complaints raised or continuing requests, whereas this is specific to information requests that are contained within the legislation and the ICO administer.
Well, thanks for that clarity. Does that help you, Ash?
Yes, thank you. No, I just wondered whether we would make reference to it, obviously not include the policy, but whether it would be wise to make reference to it. But I'll leave that in your capable hands.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, let's hold fire on that one. Councillor Timpey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Mark and Kelvin, with these new additions or this clearer policy, are you expecting that the KPI will go from amber to green in the near future?
If I can take that, I can confirm that we are, for second quarter, we are in green. Performance has improved just short of 100%. And we do expect the third quarter, October, currently that's on trend for October. And I am anticipating that it will that this is something that we will be achieving going forward. Also, we have just commissioned a new Freedom of Information system, which takes out already adds some automation to the current process, which should again improve performance. One of the things that we will be able to do, or that with this new system, is to have a publication scheme, or rather a disclosure log, which will disclose responses automatically on the council website, which should hopefully reduce the amount of FOIs we get and be getting, because it will encourage people to look at previous responses to see if they can ascertain the information that they need. And with all of these new things that we're putting in place, I do sincerely expect performance to be in the high echelons of between 95 to 100% every month going forward.
Thank you, that's brilliant, thank you.
Thank you for that encouraging comment. And I saw Anna's head nodding very ferociously there, so I think that's all good news. And I think this is the part of the policy work that we've been able to sort of deal with in getting ourselves going forward to whatever happens at some point in time. If there are no other comments, or we can basically support this recommendation. I think Aaron has supported it, second by Rory. Those in favour, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mark. Are you here for any other reports, Mark? Just forgive me. The next one.
It is the next
okay,
item,
it's a double whammy for you. I'll let you lead into data protection policy. And is this some work that you've been doing with Calvin as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is another one of Kelvin's commissions that he's come in to assist with. And again, this is an introduction of a data protection policy. Again, this builds on our guidance and introduces best practice from the ICO, and like I say, strengthens Rover's position in how we handle data across the authority. Making sure that we are guardians of that data. There is a risk in this area. If there is a data breach, the cost of that can be quite significant in terms of the monetary side of things, but also the reputational damage that could cause. So this is a really important policy to bring in, and again, like I say, it strengthens what we're doing. And this is just a bit of the tip of the iceberg, this policy, and as part of that is an instruction into training, improving awareness, just to ensure that, like I say, that policy is carried right away through the all departments, really, to ensure that people know how they should handle data. What are the main guidance, rules of handling that. What people need to consider, and also if a breach does happen, and what their duties are to do. So, like I say, that this is overall part of our governance improvements that we're doing throughout Kelvin's time here, and like I say, we're happy to answer any questions in relation to this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Aaron Rathbone.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and again, thank you to Mark and team, Kelvin especially. And just to, it's in the paper here, and I've dug these details out, that findings from the Information Commissions Officer found that from 2023 until March this year, there were 1,956 general data protection regulation breaches impacting councils. That's 1 in 10 reports. And furthermore, on Mark's point about data breaches and the cost, 12,700 data breaches in the past 3 years from metropolitan councils, with in excess of 260,000 in compensation. So just the outlines and underlines the need for this report here, which I very much support. So thanks again to Mark and the team.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aaron. Councillor Hazel Timpey. Hazel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I read those statistics and then I had to read them again. But I certainly hope that we aren't anywhere in there, Mark and Kelvin, with any GDPR breaches. Are we?
Thanks, Councillor. If I take this and bring in Kelvin, the Rover has a very good authority in relation to its record in relation to data breach and data governance. I was saying that with touching my desk just to make sure that, like I say, that continues. But yes, Robert has a very good record in relation to this. So, welcome Kelvin to come in on that.
Mark, as Mark has, I would echo what Mark has actually just said. We have a pretty robust way of dealing with or whether ensuring or mitigating against breaches. Some of you may recall we did bring forward at Cabinet previously a specific policy around data breaches. The key thing here is, as Mark alluded to, is we will be required to do some training. So we are scheduling to roll out some training to all departments and indeed to councillors as well, to ensure that everyone is up to speed and have a clear understanding of each individual responsibility in ensuring that we are in the best place to handle data protection, data and data governance within the organisation.
Yes, thank you for those reassuring words. I think we're all concerned that we as an organisation are protected, and our officers are as well, because sometimes there can be amendments or changes in what's going on, and we need to be aware of it. So, Aaron, you've moved this report.
Happy to.
Hazel is happy to second this report. Those in favour of this report, the approval of the data protection policy as outlined in this report. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Is that you? Are you finished now, Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's the end of my reports here. Yes.
Jolly good.
Thank you.
And well, Calvin's gone out pretty quick. Okay, let's. Are you still there? Sorry, Calvin, you turned
Yes,
the camera off. I thought you'd run away. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item 10, members' allowance, to consider whether or not to convene the independent remuneration panel to consider members' allowances for the remainder of the current administration in light of local government reorganisation and budget constraints. Just as a background to this, group leaders were presented with this in order to go back to their member base to say, look, this is the situation and what's your views on it, just so that we could get to tonight's meeting in order to discuss and recommend accordingly. Butter, did you want to add anything, or Lisa, wherever it's...
Chair, so I think you've just explained it all. I was just going to highlight what's said within the officer recommendations. Obviously, if there's a change in position with regards to LGR, then it may come back to members in terms of the independent remuneration panel. But as it stands, I think that's the recommendations to set out within the report, Chair. I mean, I would point out that the benchmarking that's contained within the report and the possible changes to the allowances with regards to unitary authorities. But Chair, the only thing I would add is that the two non-party or group members have also been informed of the possible consequences of this decision as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any members wanted to make any comments at all? I think it's again a bit of a gesture. I think it's a right thing to be doing. Up and down the country, you pick up these snippets from local authorities that are having this same discussion. And I suppose it's a part to play in regarding the overall budget constraints that are there. So the recommendation is to maintain members' allowances at the current levels until the demise or otherwise of Rother District Council, and to achieve a budget saving. Someone's going to propose that? Councillor Hazel Timpey, Councillor Gareth Delaney second that. Those in favour of that, and that's unanimous. Let's move on to where we need to go next. Bear with me. Page 103, I think. Right. This is agenda item 11, update on protecting local services. This is part of the service and asset devolution framework, which we've been working on for quite some little while. And this was in place before LGR, devolution and everything else. So this is some work we started quite some little while ago. Councillor Christine Bayliss will update on the progress of the service and asset devolution framework and introduce the draft services and asset evaluation matrix. Are you?
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you for this report. As members of Cabinet will know, earlier on this year we agreed the asset disposal policy after some debate, and that has been rolled out. I mean, we have an agenda item coming up later on in the agenda about disposing of an asset. At Canberra, we've discussed and agreed asset disposals in Edgerton Park recently, a variety of properties that have come up. The purpose of the report is that with the advent of LGR, with the budget pressures, there's obviously it's turbocharged the asset disposal policy. And so what the officers have done here is to come up with, if you like, a prioritisation, an evaluation matrix, and to also authorise the property disposal investment panel to on occasions, if you like, stray away from that, but be reminded that all decisions have to come back to Cabinet and be agreed here. And that's the basis of the report. I mean, I think the asset disposal policy has been working really well. It's a strong policy, which we've stuck to. I'm sure Mr. Powell will give a bit more put a bit more meat on those bones, but that's the purpose of the report that's come today.
Joe, did you want to put some more meat on that report?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'll try. Only just to clarify, absolutely the asset disposal policy is a key part of this update, and that's the policy function that we have adopted to dispose of assets. The matrix itself is applicable to all disposals, but in particular we're focused on the recent asset devolution framework, which was approved by Cabinet earlier this year in response to LGR, local government reorganisation, in order to try and protect local services for local people and sustain local services, which will be, well, to be honest, already are at risk of potential future cuts, as many of these services are discretionary and their associated assets. So if local communities are keen to sustain those going forward, they may need to consider doing so through their parish and town councils. So the framework is an opportunity for members to demonstrate openly and transparently the criteria they're using to decide which assets they will dispose of, but crucially as well, which they are not minded to dispose of for the reasons that are in the report, really, principally because they are either income generating presently or the potential to be. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joe. Are there any questions? Councillor Sue Projects here.
Thank you. Joe Powell is very well aware of some of my views on this because it is a good policy. It has given guidance to officers, but it's a policy, which means it shouldn't be a straitjacket if new information or local information comes to light. And we found that already. And it's really important for local members to know what's going on. So an example from my own patch is this piece of open green land, not very big. It could accommodate maybe a couple of houses. Should they get rid of that? Well, no, because actually what the officers didn't know, that's a main route with some steps down a big bank for people to get to the centre of the village. And the steps down the big bank are maintained by the county council. So it would be very harmful if they just got rid of that land for development. And I know there's been issues in Canberra and where things have changed. So a policy is a guide and should be allowed to be flexible if, as I say, new information comes to light. It should not be a straitjacket, so because potentially wrong decisions could be made. But it's so important for members, all our councillors to know about it so that they can comment if needed.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I would like to think that officers are engaging with ward members to bring up these local sort of situations that are there. And of course, it does say that the Property Service and Investment and Disposal Panel are authorised to make amendments, so we do have that flexibility for all the right reasons of common sense. You know, I think that's so important rather than to the straitjacket, as you said. I think this is important. Whose report is this? This is Joe's report. Does it? Oh, Christine is. Yeah. You propose it. Yeah. Resolution. Is there someone would second this? Thank you, Teresa. So that's fine, and we can vote on this, and that's unanimous. And I think this is one further step forward to achieving where we want to be at the right time. Good. Okay. Agenda item 12, the Bexhill Neighbourhood Board and Regeneration Investment Plan. Now, is this your report, Anna, or is Anne Rathbone online? And nice to see you, Anne. And I think if you can give us a brief sort of purpose of the report so that we can understand it. But I believe this is rather important in order to meet with a timeline, a deadline that you are beavering away at this moment in time to get our position where it needs to be. Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the report is asking for delegated authority to be granted to the Section 151 officer in liaison with the finance and regeneration portfolio holders to sign off the plans of the Bexhill Neighbourhood Board, which will enable the timely submission of our plans and avoid any delay in payment from central government, just because of the way the timelines occur. It's not possible to be able to get the plan agreed by the neighbourhood board and then to cabinet and then to submission, because the timescales are very short. For those some of you who are not quite so familiar with the Bexhill Neighbourhood Board, the original funding came down from the previous government under long-term plan for towns and resulted in the establishment of the Bexhill Town Board. It's for Bexhill specific funding. Then it was repackaged as a plan for neighbourhoods and now has been renamed again as part of the Pride in Place programme. So it's now Pride in Place phase 2. So just to kind of clarify what we're talking about. So with this funding, RDC is the accountable body, but Bexhill Neighbourhood Board is the decision-making body. And the guidance is really clear from MHCLG that it's the board's decision through engagement with community and business is what is key here. Obviously, RDC could refuse to accept the plan if that through Section 151, if there were major concerns about financial irregularities, mismanagement, or serious concerns about risk. But essentially, the spirit of the funding and the guidance is that the neighbourhood board is the decision-making body for the plan. We've had a lot of extensive engagement through the board to create the plan. We've had 18 focus groups. We've got another 3 in a couple of weeks' time. We've consulted with over 1,000 individual residents or business owners and VCSE representatives. So the board is confident that the plan sits well it's strategically aligned, and we're quite confident that it is based on good community and business engagement. A full report, obviously cabinet members will be very interested to see the plan. A full report with the submitted plan will be brought to the December cabinet meeting. But in the meantime, just a few key things about the plan. The 3 funding themes that have come down from central government have changed since the original long-term plan for towns. They're now thriving places, stronger communities, and taking back control, which is focused on addressing causes of disenfranchisement, such as employment, low skills levels, and so on. In terms of the emerging priorities for the neighbourhood board plan, obviously the plan is not agreed yet, that's why it's not here with you. but I can tell you that the emerging priorities are around a focus on the Bexhill Town Centre, along with Sidley and to some extent Pebsham wards. Focus on increasing footfall in the town centre to rejuvenate the town centre and businesses there. Conserving existing assets, but also building a town for the future. Repurposing vacant land or buildings. There's a renewed focus within the plan on skills and pathways to good quality employment, which will depend on a lot of good partnership working with RDC and East Sussex County Council, which is quite exciting. Looking at arrival into and wayfinding through the town and increasing connectivity, particularly between Sidley and Pebsham and the town centre and the sea. And across all of that, the thread that runs through all of the work of the Neighbourhood Board is a very strong focus on collaboration and partnership. There are several examples of this already in our preparatory work pre the programme. In terms of finance, I think it's just worth saying that all the RDC capacity, staffing capacity that is dedicated, allocated to the work of the Neighbourhood Board is fully recharged to the Neighbourhood Board capacity funding, and there's a very transparent finance model really of recharge between the board and the council. And the funding profile is within the finance section of the report. So that shows the 20 million coming down over 10 years, starting in 26-27 with a relatively small amount of capital, around 360,000 next year, and then it ramps up to 2 million per year in the years following, with about 75% of that is capital and 25% is revenue resource. So that's a very brief summary. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much, Anne. I think it was quite a clear summary, and I think that it's important that we're aware of the work that's been put in by the Neighbourhood Board and the supporting stakeholders. You had a recent visit down, did you not, recently from the MHCLG? Was that linked? That was linked very much to this, wasn't it? And the responses we've had from them previously have been rather overwhelmingly in support of all the work that we're doing.
Yes, so we are recognised for our work around community engagement, which is good, and we're also recognised by MHCLG as having a role modelling partnership and collaboration across all the three councils involved, but also across business and the community. And the Neighbourhood Board's very proud of that and sees their role as being about more than spending the money, but also about promoting a positive culture of engagement and positive community action within the town. And I think it's fair to say, and from the advisors' visit, that was re-emphasised, that MHCLG do recognise that within Bexhill.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I sense that modelling and the way that we've been acknowledged that we are, leading in this up and down the country. Christine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate Anne Rathbone on her work on this. I know Anne has a sort of a depth of experience in terms of community engagement and stakeholder engagement, and she's really brought that to bear on this particular project. And I as a local councillor, that I can see that the plans that have been developed are fantastic, and will provide long-term investment in how our town looks. I just wanted to say that as far as this particular report goes, this is, if you like, a bit of bureaucracy because we're a public body and that we have to go through this bit of bureaucracy. But basically, Rother District Council, because it's holding the money, has to sort of assure itself that it's been spent properly. And so that is the purpose of this particular report. And I'm hoping that you know, as I say, I'll get a seconder for this this motion going forward. But I wholeheartedly support this, and I'm really looking forward to the meeting in December when we actually get to see the plan and and congratulate Anne and the neighbourhood board for all the work they've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. So you've got to move this report, and someone will second that report. Thank you very much, Teresa. And those all in favour of this, which I think I would be disappointed if it's not unanimous. And yeah, hands are up there, that's fine. Yeah, I think it's making a difference, Anne. I think we've had this conversation before, haven't we? That this is some funding that we can make a difference and make a difference in many ways. And it's not always the bigger ticket funding that makes an impact, but it's the smaller areas that we can make benefits in some of the areas within the town. And this overall accountability is important because we are in the eyes of government, those that are taking that responsibility. So that report has been resolved and agreed upon, and we can move forward. Thank you, Anne. Are you going to leave us now, Anne?
If I may.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we've done that. So Camber kiosk letting. This is your report, Joe, agenda item 13, to seek approval to lease the new kiosk at the Camber Central Car Park, which I think we're all very delighted that we were able to see that completed to the quality of standard that it has been. And that really will be enhance that destination going forward. I think that's very, very important. So this is the new developed kiosk there, Joe, which you going to tell us all about it and recommendations as to where we go. Or is Christy? No, Joe is.
I'm happy to. Yep, okay. And also Councillor Timpey under the tourism brief. Yeah, it's also part of the report. That's right. I hope that the report is fairly self-explanatory. It tries to describe the process we've adopted to reach the conclusion. I hope as well members support the focus officers have on the whole offer, not just the finances of it, to try and look at what is the best quality offer, the one that will support the local economy in the best way, and also the one that looks most as if it will complement the general wider economic ambitions for the district, but also for Camber specifically. I think there is for some years been a desire strategically to try and vary the market of Camber, which is a really popular tourist destination, as we know, but is perhaps catering to a mass market, which is really legitimate, but it doesn't necessarily always capture the wider economic benefits that the whole community benefits from or could benefit from. So we hope the offer before you is a high quality offer. It's a new sort of look and feel for that area. It complements the good, well-established businesses of, for example, the Galavant in Camber, which is also trying to vary the demographic appeal of the area. And yeah, we think a really strong proposal. Just to clarify with members, the constitution as it's currently worded, all new lettings need to come to cabinet approval, whereas relets are delegated to Lorna in the 151. So I think there's some desire to see the new lets come here to be promoted. It's a good way of us promoting what we're doing and also for you to have input. So yeah, happy to take questions.
Christine, Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to Joe and the team for all their work. This is, if you like, an example of execution of our asset disposal policy. And I think a point to note here is that we're actually going to go along with a bid which actually wasn't the highest financial bid. It was, it wasn't the top bid in terms of money-wise, but the community value, the value of the actual business plans outweighed it. And I want to say this in open council, that this is how our policy works, and this is how we want to work going forward. And I know there have been questions about obtaining best value and all the rest of it, all of which can be explained if you look back at agenda item 11. But it really is important to show that the council does take into account that community value, and the value of a business and what it brings to a particular area. And so I'm very happy to propose the resolution that's set out here.
Thank you, Christine. Hazel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I totally second everything that Councillor Bayliss has said. The new Welcome Centre as a whole is a magnificent achievement for us, and this kiosk will just add a certain nuance to it that area doesn't have at the moment, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it come to fruition, and I wish the new people a lot of success, because their brand and their environmentally friendly building, the food and the beverage office that they have is exceptional. So I hope you all go down there when they're up and running. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hazel. So we have our ward councillor on the line, who I'm sure has got a view on this. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would agree with Christine and Hazel. This the offer looks extremely good, a good high quality offer, something sort of different. Yeah, wish them every success, and yeah, it looks much improved, and it should be beneficial to everybody. Really good, really pleased. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I think it complements everything else that exists down there. Rory?
I think it's great, and I note as well that the retail add-ons, one of them is dog-friendly puppuccinos, which is just pop-tastic. I'm sure as a dog lover yourself, Doug, you'll be able to, looking after our four-legged friends is always a good thing. Thank you, Chair.
Right, so we just need to seek approval to lease this, and this will go forward with officers to those applicants. So it's been proposed, it's been seconded. Those in favour of this arrangement, I think we're unanimous on that, and thank you very much. So we can move on, and we don't need to go into any confidential. We do for the next item. So given the fact that the next item, which is item 16, the following item 16 includes material. Yes, that's what I'm doing. Yes, that's what I'm doing. Okay, thank you. Right, so item 14, as I've reminded you, is the motion. The following item that will be coming forward as item 16 includes material which is exempt from publication by the virtue of Part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. As amended, as recommended that the press and public be excluded. The relevant paragraph of Schedule 12A indicating the nature of the exempt information is stated, and after the item is reproduced in full at the end of the agenda. In all the circumstances of each case, it is considered that the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.
Move exclusion.
Thank you. And those members of the public in the gallery, they're going to move out, are they? Agreed? Yes, agreed. Okay, so we're now back live, which brings us to the conclusion of this evening's cabinet meeting, and thank you for those that have been viewing externally, and those that were in the public gallery that had to leave before the last item came forward. Thank you, everybody. 20:05, I'm told.